Here, people disappear faster than you can blink, without screams, without traces of struggle, as if they were simply erased from reality with an eraser. Right now, these locations are open to tourists and no one will tell you that it's a trap. Today, we will descend into the planet's real black holes, from a forest that hypnotizes victims to a valley where only body parts are found. Get the children away from the screens and watch until the end. Because location number 1 is where millions dream of going, not suspecting that they are buying a one-way ticket. Let's go. In Queensland, amidst a national park, something rises that local Aborigines have avoided for thousands of years. Officially, it's called Black Mountain, but the indigenous people call this place Kalkajaka, which translates as Place of Spears, or in a looser interpretation, Mountain of Death. Even visually, this place evokes a shiver. Imagine a gigantic pile of huge black granite boulders, piled haphazardly on top of each other, forming a mountain several hundred meters high. There is practically no soil, no trees, only black stone heated by the sun. It seems as if someone giant simply dumped a bucket of coal here. Why does this place open our top? Because people and animals disappear here with frightening regularity, and the most terrifying thing is how they disappear. One of the most famous stories happened back in the late 19th century. A local farmer named Greiner was looking for runaway bulls. The cattle tracks led directly to the foot of Black Mountain. Greiner, being an experienced tracker, entered the labyrinth of black stones with his horse and dog. No one came back. Later, search parties found nothing, or rather not quite. They found tracks that suddenly broke off as if the rider and animals had ascended into the sky. No bodies, no equipment, and this was not an isolated incident. Local police archives record a missing courier named Sugarfoot Jack, who disappeared here with 2 companions, and 2 police trackers who went to look for a missing criminal entered the caves of the mountain and simply dissolved into the darkness. Modern geologists are trying to give this a rational explanation. The fact is that Black Mountain is not a monolith. It is millions of boulders, between which a network of endless voids, tunnels, and caves has formed, going deep underground. When the wind blows at a certain angle, the mountain emits eerie sounds. Tourists describe them as a low hum, hiss, or even groans. Imagine you are standing in the heat, black stone all around, and a heavy sigh comes from under your feet. Psychologists say that this infrasound can cause panic attacks, disorientation, and hallucinations. The scenario is always the same. A person goes a little deeper, hears a strange sound, loses orientation, takes a wrong step, and falls into one of thousands of crevices. The depth of these stone traps can reach tens of meters. Screaming is useless. The thick granite muffles all sounds. You simply find yourself buried alive in a stone bag while outside your friends pass 2 meters from you, unaware that you are dying right under their feet. But the Aborigines disagree. They have a legend about an evil spirit that lives inside the mountain and feeds on the souls of those who dared to cross its boundaries. They say, if you see Black Mountain, don't look at it too long. It can call you. And you know, looking at the statistics of the missing, the version with spirits is no less believable than accidental falls. How else to explain cases when entire groups of people holding hands disappeared? We move to the heart of Africa, Zimbabwe. Here, Mount Nyangani rises. In photos, it looks like paradise. Green slopes, waterfalls, sun, an ideal place for tourists. But if you ask the locals if they want to climb it, you will see real animal terror in their eyes. They know a secret that guides keep silent about. This mountain knows how to erase people from reality. The scenario of disappearances here is always the same, like a broken record. You walk along a path, the weather is excellent, and suddenly in seconds, a strange fog descends on you. This is not just moisture. Survivors call it a milky wall. It muffles sounds, breaks compasses, and instantly disorients. At this moment, you fall out of our world. The most terrifying case occurred in 2014. 31-year-old Zaid Dada was climbing the mountain with his wife. He stepped away from the group by only 10 meters to admire a beautiful view. Friends turned away for a second. When they looked back, Zaid was gone. It's an open plateau. There's nowhere to hide. Special forces and helicopters with thermal imagers were deployed for the search. The devices should have detected body heat even underground, but the screens showed absolute emptiness. Zaid simply vanished into thin air. He has not been found to this day. But even more terrifying are the stories of those who returned. In the 80s, 2 daughters of a local official disappeared here. They were searched for 4 days. They were found alive in shock. And their story blows your mind. The girls swore that they had not disappeared anywhere. They sat on a rock for a couple of hours. All these 4 days, they saw search helicopters directly overhead. They saw rescuers passing 2 steps away. The girls screamed, waved their hands, threw stones at people, but the rescuers looked right through them. To the world of the living, the girls became invisible ghosts. Can you imagine this nightmare? Seeing help but being behind an invisible wall. Local elders say, Nyangani is a living creature with its own rules. And the main rule sounds like nonsense, but it saves lives. If you get lost in the fog, you cannot cry. If you start to panic, sob, or complain, the mountain will not let you go. You need to sit down and silently wait until the spirits lose interest in you. Zaid Dada's relatives turned to sorcerers, and they said, he was too angry and screamed. The mountain was offended. Nyangani stands there right now, a beautiful and deadly trap that waits for you to break the silence. We move to the USA, to the quiet state of Vermont. Usually nothing happens here. Forests, mountains, boredom. But there is an area around the town of Glastonbury that locals call the Bennington Triangle. And what happened here from 1945 to 1950 defies all logic. Here, people don't just get lost in the forest. They disappear before witnesses' eyes. The most shocking case, which still baffles the FBI, occurred on December 1st, 1949. James Tetford was returning home by bus. It was winter, the windows were closed, and the bus drove nonstop. Witnesses, 14 passengers, confirmed it. James was sitting in his seat when they passed the last stop before the terminal. But when the bus entered Bennington, James's seat was empty. Think about it. The bus is traveling at full speed. The doors are closed, the windows are not broken. James's belongings are on the overhead rack. An open bus schedule brochure lies on his seat, but the person himself is gone. He vanished from a sealed tin can in motion. And this is not an isolated case. A year later, 8-year-old Paul Jepson was playing in the yard while his mother fed the pigs. She turned away for literally a minute. The boy disappeared. The police brought in the best search dogs. The dogs picked up the scent, confidently led the police to the middle of the highway, and stopped. The trail simply ended in the middle of the road, as if the child had been picked up into the air. There were no tire marks, no cars nearby. In just 5 years, 5 people disappeared without a trace in this forest. The only body found by Freed and Langer was discovered 7 months later in tall grass in a clearing that searchers had combed dozens of times before. The body was in such a state that the cause of death could not be determined. After 1950, the disappearances suddenly stopped. What was it? A serial killer with invisibility abilities? A UFO? Or a time rift? There are no answers. There's only an empty bus and belongings left without an owner. We move north into the icy embrace of Alaska. Usually when we hear the phrase ghost town, we imagine old settlements from the gold rush era, where people left simply because the gold ran out. Boring economics. But the town of Portlock on the Kenai Peninsula is a completely different story. It is the only place in modern U.S. history that was evacuated and abandoned for one single reason. Its inhabitants began to be exterminated by an unknown predator. Imagine the 1940s. Portlock is a thriving settlement. It has a cannery, a school, a post office, dozens of houses. People have lived here for generations. They are harsh hunters and fishermen who are not afraid of bears or wolves. They know the forest like the back of their hand. But at some point, something settles in the forests around Portlock. First, mountain sheep hunters began to disappear. Strong men with rifles would go into the forest and not return. At first, it was thought to be an accident, an avalanche, a rogue bear. But then, when search parties began to find what was left of the people, panic gripped the entire town. Bodies were found in the lagoon, or rather their fragments. They were torn to pieces with such monstrous force that no brown bear is capable of. One local resident later recounted finding the body of his friend, which looked as if he had been picked up by the legs and slammed against a tree like a rag doll. But the most terrifying thing was not in the forest. The most terrifying thing was that it began to approach the houses. Residents began to report a gigantic humanoid creature covered in dark fur. Local Alutiiq tribes called it Nantinak, a half-human, half-beast. Witnesses described it as a creature almost 3 meters tall that moved on 2 legs but with unnatural speed. It was not afraid of fire, it was not afraid of dogs. The dogs just whimpered and hid under the porch. And what was most terrifying, it seemed not to be afraid of bullets. The climax of the horror occurred in 1949. People were afraid to leave their homes even during the day. Work at the cannery stopped. Imagine the atmosphere. An entire town sits behind boarded up doors with loaded rifles, listening to every rustle behind the wall. Official letters from the local postmaster have been preserved in the archives. There is no mysticism in them, only dry bureaucratic horror. He wrote to his superiors requesting the closure of the office, quoting, "Due to constant terror from an unknown creature and mass deaths of residents." One day, the residents of Portlock made a decision. They simply packed their belongings, got into boats, and sailed away. They abandoned everything, furniture, tools, their homes. They fled as if the devil himself was chasing them. Today, Portlock still stands there. The houses have rotted and collapsed. The cannery is overgrown with moss. But you know what's interesting? Even after 70 years, no one tries to restore the settlement. Fishermen try not to enter this bay, and modern hunters say that in the forests around Portlock, there is an unnatural dead silence. Birds do not sing there. We descend from Alaska slightly south into British Columbia. Here, amidst majestic forests and fogs, lies Highway 16. On maps, it's just an ordinary 700 kilometers long transportation artery. But among the people, this road has another name that chills the blood of locals, the Highway of Tears. This is not mysticism or an urban legend. This place is a real conveyor belt of death, operating for decades. Imagine a road that runs through endless wilderness. On one side, dense forest. On the other, mountains. The nearest settlement can be hundreds of kilometers away. And it's on this stretch that girls began to disappear from 1969 onwards. The scenario is always the same. A girl stands on the roadside hitchhiking or her car breaks down. Someone stops to help, and that's it. No one ever sees this girl again, neither alive nor dead. Official police statistics speak of 18 victims, but indigenous organizations and local residents name a completely different figure, over 80 people. Think about this difference. Where did the other 60 go? The police simply shrug their shoulders, blaming it on running away from home or an accident in the forest. But the most terrifying thing about the Highway of Tears is its atmosphere. Truck drivers say that on this stretch, they often feel an inexplicable anxiety. The radio stops picking up a signal. There's a feeling that someone is watching the car from the thicket. Sometimes the clothes of the missing are found here, neatly folded in a conspicuous place, as if someone is playing with the police, leaving trophies. Of course, skeptics will say it's just the work of a serial killer. But therein lies the main mystery. The disappearances have been happening for over 50 years. One person physically could not have committed crimes for so long. This means that either an entire dynasty of murderers is at work here, or the place itself attracts evil like a magnet. Local residents have installed homemade billboards along the highway. They don't advertise burgers, they show the faces of missing girls and inscriptions. Killer at large, do not hitchhike. This is the only road in the world where the no stopping sign is not a traffic rule, but a survival instruction. It is said that the Highway of Tears has its own energy, heavy, viscous. If you stop here at night to change a tire, you will feel it on your skin. The silence here does not calm, it presses down. And everyone who drives on Highway 16 instinctively steps on the gas to get through this corridor of death as quickly as possible. Because no one knows who or what will come out of the forest if you turn off the engine. We fly across the ocean to Europe to legendary Transylvania. Yes, the homeland of Count Dracula. But believe me that vampires are a children's fairy tale compared to what happens in the Hoia Baciu forest, located near the city of Cluj-Napoca. Journalists call this place the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, and locals try not to even look in its direction. As soon as you cross the border of this forest, you understand. Something is wrong here. Nature itself looks sick here. The trees don't grow straight. They are strangely bent at the base at a 90-degree angle and then shoot upwards, resembling people twisted in agony or giant question marks. Moreover, they are all bent in one direction, as if bowing to some invisible dark force in the center of the thicket. Scientists still cannot explain this phenomenon. Neither wind nor soil can make the forest grow like that. But visual horror is just the beginning. People who dare to go deep into Hoia Baciu encounter physical effects. You walk along a path and suddenly feel sharp nausea, dizziness, and inexplicable panic anxiety. Do you feel like thousands of eyes are standing behind every tree and watching your back? Many tourists run out of there with real burns, rashes, and scratches on their bodies, even though they didn't fall or pass through thorny bushes. These marks appear under their clothes, as if the very atmosphere of the forest is corroding their skin. The most famous legend of disappearance is associated with a shepherd. A local resident decided to herd a flock of 200 sheep through the forest to shorten the way to the fair. He entered the thicket with the animals, and that was it. Neither the shepherd nor the sheep nor even a shred of wool or bones were ever seen again. To disappear without a trace in a forest that can be seen through is impossible, but they disappeared. An even more frightening story happened with a 5-year-old girl. She ran into the forest after a butterfly and disappeared. Parents and police searched for her for weeks, months, years. Everyone had resigned themselves to the child's death, but after 5 years, the girl walked out of the forest alive. The shock was that she was wearing the same clothes she had on the day of her disappearance. The clothes were clean, unworn, and the most terrifying thing, the girl hadn't grown an inch. For her, only 5 minutes had passed, while for the world, 5 years had passed. Where was she? In what time pocket? She remembered nothing. In the center of the forest, there is a place called the clearing. It is a perfect circle of bare earth where nothing grows. Biologists took soil samples. It is normal, but life simply refuses to exist there. It is believed to be the epicenter of activity. It was here, in 1968, that military technician Emil Barnea took the clearest photo of a UFO in history, which experts recognized as authentic. Electronics go crazy here. Batteries drain in seconds, and faces of people who were not nearby appear in photographs. Hoia Baciu is a place where the line between our world and something else is so thin that you can accidentally fall through it simply by walking among the crooked trees. From the gloomy forests of Europe, we move to the scorching desert of Arizona. Near the city of Phoenix rises a mountain range, whose very name screams danger. The Superstition Mountains. For tourists, it's a beautiful backdrop for photos with cacti, but for adventurers, this place is a real meat grinder. The legend of this place smells of gold and blood. In the 19th century, a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, nicknamed the Dutchman, found an incredibly rich gold vein in these mountains. He kept the secret of the mine's location until his death and took it to his grave in 1891. Since then, thousands of people, gripped by gold fever, have ventured into these rocks to find the lost Dutchman's copies. The problem is that many of them do not return, and those who are found would be better off not being found. The main mystery of the Superstition Mountains is a strange tradition of death. Here, people don't just die of thirst or fall off cliffs, headless bodies are found. The most famous case, which became the standard of horror, occurred in 1931 with Adolf Ruth. He was not a naive tourist, but an experienced treasure hunter. He had an old map that he claimed led directly to the mine. He went into the mountains despite warnings and disappeared. 6 months later, searchers found his remains, and this is where the nightmare begins. The body was intact, but the head was missing. It was found several months later, hundreds of meters from the body. There were bullet holes in the skull, fired from a very close range. The map, of course, was gone. The police attributed everything to suicide. Yes, suicide, where a person shoots himself twice and then hides his head half a kilometer away. But locals know this is not an isolated incident. In the 1940s, 1950s, and even today, headless bodies are found here. Who does this? Bandits guarding gold, drug cartels, or something ancient. The Apache Indians have avoided this place for centuries. They call these mountains the Devil's Playground. According to their beliefs, the thunder god lives there, guarding the entrance to the underworld. The Apache say, if you seek what does not belong to you, the mountain will take your head as a trophy. In 2010, 3 gold seekers from Utah ventured there again. They were prepared, armed, and had GPS. A year later, their remains were found scattered across the canyon, the official version, just falling from a cliff. But why were their phones and navigators found neatly folded in another place? Geologists say that these mountains have very strong magnetic ore. Compasses lie here, electronics glitch. You can be an hour's walk from the highway, see city lights, but walk in circles until the sun burns you to ashes. The Superstition Mountains stand as a silent monument to human greed. Gold may indeed be there, but the price of admission is literally your head. When we talk about mysterious disappearances in the ocean, the first thing that comes to mind is the Bermuda Triangle. Pop culture has made it a brand, but few know that it has an evil twin on the other side of the world in the Pacific Ocean. And judging by statistics, it is much hungrier and more dangerous. The Japanese call this place Mano Umi, which translates as the Devil's Sea. It is located south of Tokyo, forming a triangle between Japan, the Bonin Islands, and Guam. If private planes and yachts of inexperienced captains often disappear in the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Sea does not bother with trifles. It swallows huge cargo ships, tankers, and even warships equipped with the latest technology. The most terrible period in the history of this place occurred in the early 1950s. In just a couple of years, 9 large modern ships disappeared without a trace. Think about it. These are not wooden boats. These are steel giants. None of them managed to send an SOS signal. Search operations found no wreckage, no oil slicks, no bodies. The ships simply vanished from the surface of the ocean as if they were sucked into a giant whirlpool. The Japanese authorities were in a panic. To investigate the situation in 1952, the government equipped a special research vessel, the Kayo Maru No. 5. On board was an elite team, 31 people, including the best oceanographers, surveyors, and sailors. Their task was simple: enter the dangerous zone, find the cause of the anomaly, and return with a report. The irony of fate turned out to be cruel. The vessel sent to investigate the disappearance itself disappeared. The Kayo Maru No. 5 entered the Devil's Sea and vanished. Later, only a few fragments were found, which confirmed the loss but did not explain the cause. This was the last straw. The Japanese government officially declared this zone dangerous for navigation. This is perhaps the only case in the world where a state legally recognizes the existence of a cursed zone. What is happening there? Scientists talk about enormous seismic activity. The ocean floor in this area is literally boiling. Underwater volcanoes erupt constantly, creating wandering islands that appear and disappear in days. Perhaps methane emissions change the density of the water, and ships instantly lose buoyancy, falling to the bottom like a stone. But there is another theory. Pilots flying over this zone often reported strange things with time. Clocks were slow or fast. Navigation instruments showed that the plane was flying in a different direction, although the pilot saw the sun. And millennia-old legends say that dragons live underwater, rising to collect tribute. Be that as it may, the Devil's Sea keeps its secrets at a depth of several kilometers, where no ray of light can reach. And if you see a route through this zone on a map, it's better to choose another path. U.S. national parks, Yellowstone, Great Smoky Mountains. Millions of tourists go there to connect with nature. But former police detective David Paulides, after analyzing thousands of cases over the past 100 years, discovered a pattern that chills the blood. He called it Missing 411. People don't disappear in these parks by chance. They disappear in specific clusters. And the circumstances of these disappearances are eerily similar, as if orchestrated by a single director. First, silence. Almost always the disappearance occurs in dead silence. No screams, no rustling branches. A child walks on a path 3 meters from their parents. The father turns away to adjust his backpack. Turns back, the child is gone. Second, dogs. This is the strangest part. The best search dogs who can find a person by a week-old scent behave erratically in these cases. They either whimper and refuse to track, tucking their tails, or they reach a certain point, sit down, and stare into space. The trail ends as if the person was pulled upwards. Third, weather. As soon as a search operation begins, nature seems to try to interfere. Almost instantly, a snowstorm, downpour, or thick fog descends, erasing any traces. But the most shocking element of the puzzle is where the victims or their remains are found. This is called impossible mobility. Imagine a 2-year-old child goes missing, a toddler who can barely walk and stumbles on flat ground. Hundreds of volunteers search for him. He is found several days later, 15 kilometers from the place of disappearance. And not just in the forest, but on the top of a sheer cliff where alpinists climb with safety ropes. How did a 2-year-old child cover such a distance in a couple of days that an adult man would struggle to cover? How did he climb a cliff without equipment? And why are his clothes often neatly removed and folded nearby? And his body has no scratches, even though he should have been struggling through thorny bushes. Surviving children often tell stories that are attributed to shock and fantasy. They talk about big, hairy people who carried them in their arms, or about bears that walked on 2 legs and fed them berries. U.S. Special Services refuse to keep a single register of missing persons in national parks. If you ask a ranger how many people have disappeared in Yosemite in a year, he won't give you an answer. This statistic officially does not exist. Why? Perhaps because the numbers are so frightening that if they were published, the parks would have to be closed forever. These places look like nature reserves, but statistics suggest that for someone, they are hunting grounds, and we are not the hunters in this game. Welcome to the Alaskan Triangle, a giant zone between Anchorage, Juneau, and Barrow. Just consider this figure. Since 1988, over 16,000 people have disappeared without a trace here. This is not a typo. It's the population of an entire city that has simply vanished into the icy wilderness. Statistically, twice as many people per capita disappear in Alaska than in any other U.S. state. Skeptics will say, well, of course, it's cold, wild animals, cracks, and glaciers. And they are partly right, but this doesn't explain where the planes go. A story that proved to the whole world that something is wrong with this place occurred in October 1972. It wasn't a pleasure flight by an amateur tourist. On board a twin-engine Cessna were Congressman Nick Begich and House Majority Leader Hale Boggs. These were people of presidential caliber. The plane departed from Anchorage to Juneau. The weather was clear for flying. The pilots were aces. The plane simply disappeared from radar, without an SOS signal, without reports of malfunctions. The U.S. government launched the most massive search operation in the country's history at that time. 40 military aircraft, 50 civilian vessels, hundreds of rescuers scoured every meter of the route for 39 days. They were not just looking for people. They were looking for at least a wing fragment, an oil slick, a piece of fuselage. The result? Zero. An absolute deafening zero. A huge plane with VIP passengers simply vanished from reality. Not a single bolt has been found to this day. And there are hundreds of such cases. Planes fly into this zone and disappear. Pilots who were lucky enough to return tell eerie things. They say that navigation instruments in the triangle go crazy. Compasses spin like tops, and radio communication is filled with strange static noise in which voices can be heard. Scientists explain this by powerful magnetic anomalies. The Earth here is literally electrified. Electromagnetic vortices can disrupt instruments and disorient pilots. But the local Tlingit tribes are sure that science is powerless here. For centuries, they have told legends about the Kushtaka, a shape-shifting creature that lures travelers into the wilderness by mimicking a child's cry, or about giant ice pyramids hidden deep underground that act as energy generators, absorbing matter. Whatever it may be, the facts remain. The Alaskan Triangle works like a giant vacuum cleaner. It takes people, planes, and ships and never, hear this, never returns them. We are now opening the top 3 leaders. And if until now we've been talking about mysticism, ghosts, and UFOs, forget about it. The third place in our top is frightening precisely because there is no mysticism here. Here, there is only pure, concentrated horror of reality. Look at the map of the Americas. You will see the Pan-American Highway, the longest road in the world connecting Alaska and Argentina. It's a grandiose project. But if you look closely, you'll see that in one place, this line breaks off. Between Panama and Colombia, there is no road. This place is called the Darien Gap. It is 100 kilometers of impassable swamps, jungles, and mountains, and it is the most dangerous place in the Western Hemisphere. Locals call it the Green Hell. Why do people disappear here? Because Darien is a perfect killing machine created by nature and perfected by man. First, nature tries to kill you. The jungle here is so dense that sunlight barely touches the ground. The continent's most venomous snakes live here. Spiders the size of a dinner plate and insects carrying deadly fevers. Swamps swallow a person up to their waist in a minute. The rule of Darien is simple. If you break a leg, you are dead. There are no rescuers, no communication, no evacuation. A group will not carry you. You will be left behind. But nature is only half the problem. The Darien Gap is a no man's land. Neither Panamanian nor Colombian laws apply here. This territory is controlled by brutal drug cartels and armed groups. For them, the dense jungle is an ideal corridor for drug and arms trafficking. If you are an extreme tourist who decided to conquer the gap, for the cartel you are either a witness who needs to be eliminated or merchandise for which a ransom can be obtained. Annually, thousands of migrants dreaming of reaching the U.S. try to cross this hell, and thousands of them disappear forever. Survivors tell stories that chill the blood. They say that the trail is literally strewn with bodies. Imagine you are walking through mud, choking on the humidity, and stepping over the corpse of a person who fell here 2 days ago. No one buries him. In tropical conditions, the jungle disposes of a body in just 72 hours. Nature erases evidence faster than any police can react. Famous journalist Robert Young Pelton, who visited there, described cases where a group of 3 Swedish tourists were warned not to enter the forest. They laughed, saying they had excellent equipment and GPS. No one ever saw them again. Later, only one boot was found. The Darien Gap is a black hole of civilization. Here you can disappear because you were bitten by a snake, because you drowned in a river during a sudden flood, or because you simply looked into the eyes of the wrong person with an assault rifle. There is no mystery here. There is only statistics. And it says, do not go to Darien. We return to Japan, to the foot of the sacred Mount Fuji. This is one of the most recognizable symbols of the country. A snow-capped peak, blooming cherry blossoms, a picture-perfect view. But few look down to the very base of the mountain. And there, the Aokigahara Forest, known as Jukai or the Sea of Trees, spreads out. And this place rightly takes the second spot in our ranking, because it is the most famous soul trap in the world. From a geological point of view, Aokigahara is an anomaly. The forest grew directly on solidified lava after a volcanic eruption in the 9th century. The soil here is saturated with iron, and this creates the first circle of hell for anyone who dares to stray from the path. Compasses don't work here. The needle just starts spinning wildly. GPS often loses signal due to the dense canopy. But the most terrifying thing here is the sound, or rather its absence. The porous lava underfoot works as perfect sound insulation. It absorbs any noise. You can scream at the top of your voice, and your scream will fade away in literally 10 meters. Here, there is an unnatural, cottony silence that presses on the eardrums and drives one mad. Tourists say that in this forest, it feels as if someone is standing behind you, but when you turn around, there are only the crooked trunks of trees. Aokigahara has a grim reputation as the suicide forest. Annually, volunteers comb the outskirts of the forest and find between 50 and 100 bodies, but we are talking about the missing, about those who were not found. Local legends say that in the Middle Ages, poor peasants brought their elderly here, whom they could not feed, and left them to die. It is said that the forest is imbued with the malice of these Yurei spirits, and these spirits do everything to make you get lost. If you decide to walk along a tourist trail, you will see a chilling sight. Plastic ribbons or ropes stretching from the road deep into the thicket. They are left by those who go into the forest to die but are in doubt. They tie a ribbon to find their way out if they change their mind. The most terrifying thing is to find the end of such a ribbon. Often it ends at an old moss-covered tent. You approach, see a sleeping bag inside, food wrappers, personal belongings, books, but no person. The tent has been standing here for years. Where did the owner go? He simply stepped further into the sea of trees. The relief of the forest consists of endless crevices, caves, and pits disguised by moss and roots. One wrong step, and you will fall into the void. The lava will reliably hide the body. There is a story about tourists who went into the forest for thrills, lost the trail, and began to panic. In a panic, they ran, as they thought, to the exit, but in reality, they went deeper into the thicket, where a compass is useless and screams are not heard. Aokigahara is a place where death has become part of the landscape. A sign hangs at the entrance. Your life is a precious gift from your parents. Please think of them. But for hundreds of people who enter this green canopy every year, this sign becomes the last thing they read in their lives. The forest is silent, and in this silence, people disappear. Canada again, Northwest Territories. Here, amidst wild canyons and raging rivers, lies Nahanni National Park. You can only get here by helicopter or by water. For 500 kilometers around, there is no one. Usually, geographical names like Death Valley or Devil's Mountain are just beautiful metaphors. But the Valley of the Headless earned its name not for a catchy phrase. It is a literal description of what is found here. It all started in the Gold Rush era. In 1905, brothers Willie and Frank McLeod went into this valley looking for gold. They were experienced survivalists, knew the forest, and could shoot. They found gold and even managed to send a message about a rich vein, and then communication broke off. They were searched for 3 years. In 1908, another search party stumbled upon their camp. What they saw went down in criminal history. The brothers' bodies lay near extinguished campfire. They were in sleeping bags, and both were headless. The heads were not gnawed off by animals, the cuts were clean, and the heads themselves were nowhere to be found. Skeptics said these were rival bandits, perhaps. But in 1917, Swiss gold prospector Martin Jorgensen went into the valley. He built a strong cabin and was armed to the teeth. After some time, his cabin was found burned to the ground. A skeleton was found inside, headless. The head was missing again. Since then, a real epidemic began. Canadian police archives record that from 1908 to 1969, 44 people disappeared or were found beheaded under mysterious circumstances in the Nahanni Valley. Just think about it. This is dense taiga. There are no maniacs hiding behind bushes. There are no roads here. Who or what has been hunting people for decades, taking heads as trophies? Bears? Grizzlies can kill. They can tear apart. But they don't cut off heads and carry them away, leaving the body untouched. The local Dean Indians have feared entering the canyon for centuries. They tell a legend about the Naha tribe. These were fierce warriors who lived in the mountains and one day simply disappeared. The Indians believed that the Naha did not leave, but were reborn into something else, into spirits guarding the gold of the valley. And the price for this gold is a head. In the 21st century, people continue to disappear. Modern tourists rafting down the river tell of an inexplicable feeling of animal fear that washes over them in waves, of strange lights on the tops of cliffs where humans cannot climb, of giant footprints that belong to no known animal. The Valley of the Headless remains one of the least studied places on the planet. It beckons with beauty and gold, but the statistics are relentless. The chance of returning from there incomplete is too high. This is a place where nature tells us directly, you are not welcome here. We are used to considering ourselves the masters of the planet, but these 13 places prove otherwise. Earth is still a predator, and we are just guests. Google Maps show the landscape, but not the danger. And now, the million-dollar question. In which of these places would you risk spending a night alone for a huge sum of money? Write in the comments, I'll like the bravest answer. If you sleep with the lights on tonight, like this video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation. Take care and stay on the path. Bye.